All right, welcome everybody to the Sefirot ha-Omer class, exploring the special sefira of each week of the Omer. Welcome to the shiur for the fifth week of the Omer, the week of Hode. Hode is one of the two embodied spheros. So we started exploring the first one last week, Netzach, which is on the right side. It's associated with Moshe Rabbeinu, and Hode is on the left side and is associated with his brother Aharon HaKohen, Aaron the high priest. And what is it that makes Hode special? Well, as I said last week, so the right side is generally associated with masculinity, the left side associated with femininity. So the right side, because of I guess stereotypes or what have you, associated with more active, initiative dynamics, whereas the left side is more receptive, containing dynamics. And but Netzach and Hode are very interesting. They actually start to queer it a little bit because while Netzach is on the right side, it actually draws from the left side, which is maybe what explains Moses's more quietistic nature. And even though Hode is on the left side, it draws from the right side. So they're like this, but they're drawing their energy from opposing sides. And this is why, especially Hode, which is down here, is and the Kohanim, the priests, are associated with the sefira of Chesed, even though Chesed is catty corner to the right. Right? So Hode is down here, Tiferes, Chesed, and we see actually that in many Kabbalistic and Hasidic texts, the priest is seen as the paragon of loving kindness. And the reason for that is because Hode is actually drawing its energy above from the right side, from the side of love. So just a little bit kind of the sacred choreography of the Nativot Shalom of the Sefirot, the 32 paths of the Sefirot. But Hode in particular is associated with Aharon HaKohen and has its own particular quality we're going to look at. And what I want to look at especially is Hode as a kind of unerodable dignity, a dignity that persists and pervades and subsists despite whatever, in a sense, you are engaged in. It's a quiet, confident sense of serenity. We saw a similar kind of dynamic in terms of the Netzach we talked about last week. Netzach's quality of not ever being beaten down. That's Netzach as persistence. But Hode, I think, is in a sense subsistence, in the sense that it is stillness. It is not directly engaging and struggling. Right? Last week was the week of struggle. Hode is the week of quietude. It's the week of sitting with yourself. It's the week of humility. And but we're also going to see, though, there's a paradox at play with Hode as well. And we're going to see that kind of stira, that contradiction that will be the engine that will drive this shiur. So let's get started. Let's look at the source sheet. I want to start with actually a contemporary text, a quote from a rabbi who passed recently. So this is a quote from Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, who was one of the founders of the Renewal Movement. And actually, he had some descendants in Toronto. And he also a lot of time in Manitoba, if I remember correctly, as well. So good Canadian connections. But he says, Hode is like doing your dirty laundry. Which is a very provocative statement. Hode is like doing your dirty laundry. That's not like a good selling point. It's like, the thing that we hate doing? Like, listen, Hode is doing a sink of dirty dishes. Hode. All right, so when you see this, this slightly tongue-in-cheek saying, what do you take this to mean? Like, what do you think he's trying to get at? And we're gonna revisit this quote at the end, and I think actually we're gonna see it proven correctly. But we'll see what he meant. So but before we get through the texts, I'm curious just from your own perspective, what do you think Reb Zalman is getting at? Just like take a stab. Try to predict what you think it means.
Seems like he's talking about cleaning yourself or cleaning out your your
Okay, it's running your soul through a spin cycle. Okay, great. Love it. Any other ideas? All right, well, I'm going to take an executive prerogative and say Kathy is right. Kathy is correct. Everyone else is wrong. All the other ideas you're having, bad. No. Okay, so Kathy has a very interesting idea, right? That she's saying that Hode, or what Reb Zalman's interpretation of it, is a reflexive, right? It's self-turning, and it's about actually let's say, the divine drudgery of what it means to do the real work of self-cleansing, of bringing yourself to a sense of a place of readiness. Beautiful. It's a beautiful image. I think there's definitely in that there. And I want to explore some other inroads to this saying as well. But we're just going to leave it simmering in our brains, and we're going to move forward. And we'll look at one of the ways in which the word Hode appears in the book of Psalms. Now, this is not like a technical Kabbalistic usage of the term. This is just the way, but this is some of the raw material that the Kabbalists, like Yosef Chikatilia in his book Sharei Ora, are going to be drawing from these verses that mention the term Hode. So the verse is from the psalm, that special psalm that we say on after services on Shabbos Mincha, and also from the special psalm which we say on Rosh Chodesh, Baruchi Nafshi. So it says Baruchi Nafshi. It's renowned for being the very long one. It's very, very long. It says Baruchi Nafshi es Hashem. Bless God, my soul. Hashem Elokai gadalta me'od. God, my Lord, you are magnificent. Gadalta, I use the word like magnify, right? You are huge, you're grand, you're magnificent, you're amazing. Hod v'hadar lavashta. You are clothed, lavashta, like lavushim, malbush. You are clothed in Hod and hadar. Hadar means beauty, which is why it's the name of the gift shop of the synagogue I grew up going to. And Hode, we're going to leave it largely undefined, but translates dignity or majesty. Now, when we talk about dignity, one thing I think that's special about the notion of dignity is that it is a perspective, in a sense, that has a productive friction with what it is that you're experiencing. Right? Whereas Netzach is an inability to be eroded, right? An inability to be totally worn down to the nub. You're sticking with it, you're sticking through it, you're gonna get through this. Dignity is like as if you're in another world, even though you're going through something, right? You're having mud flung at you, but you bear it. And I think, actually, Kathy's intuition is quite right. It is about carrying yourself. You carry yourself with dignity. Or you can't really bestow others with dignity, per se. You can dignify others, I suppose, by showing them respect. But you carry yourself with dignity. Right? It's a way of relating to or regarding oneself. So God is clothed, and then back to this laundry image, right? Clothed in majesty and dignity, in beauty and glory. So there's something about the way in which these things are protective, perhaps, right? Like a cloak of some kind. And something that you're garbed with, right? Something that gives you a sense of carriage, a sense of import. But also, again, something that it's not just something on the outside, something that actually seeps into your interiority. So let's continue. We'll look at this next text, and we're going to zoom ahead about a while. We're going to zoom ahead, I guess, let's see, David is around 1000 BCE, so I guess 2,500 years to the Tomer Devorah, which we've mentioned before. This is the Kabbalistic Musar work of the Ramak, of Moshe Cordovero, in which it's basically a guidebook towards actually trying to model yourself and imitate God through imitating the different dynamics of the Sefirot. So he talks about them first vis-a-vis God, and then says what it means for us, how to behave. So we'll start first with how he takes Netzach and Hode, because again, he deals with them together. And he sees Netzach and Hode as specifically actually what it means to engage in the world of Torah study. Now, the risk of anything valuable is that you don't forget that. Right? In the sense that, you're doing something of great importance, and you let that go to your head. Right? If you are doing something of great value to society, there's a way to carry yourself in which you make sure other people know it, or there's a way to carry yourself with dignity. And that's going to be the route we're going to navigate. So he says Rishona. He says it first. Hamisgael Talmidim Gorem Shai Tiferes Yisgael V'Yis'ala Me'al Netzach v'Hode. Somebody who's teaching Torah and becomes puffed up with themselves, right? Becomes proud of themselves, and specifically lords yourself over your students. So here what we're describing is a relationship of power, a relationship of influence. And it's one that's supposed to be one in which you use your influence towards the development and the procession of the people in whose charge you've been put, or rather, whose charges have been put in you. You're supposed to be taking care of them, but instead, if you use them as a means to glorify yourself, then it's not just something that causes harm to others, right? Taking advantage of power relations, something we're becoming more and more conscious of in today's day and age, right? Especially when it comes to these hierarchical relationships and the ways in which people in positions of power will use them to achieve their own ends. But a real teacher, right? This is what's implied here. A real teacher uses all of what they have for the sake of another, not for the sake of themselves. That's what it means to be in that position. You need to be worthy of it. Yes, you do have influence. Yes, you are in charge of these people. But it's because they've been put in your stead. They've been put in your charge. You're to take care of them. You care for them. Their well-being is essential to what it means for you to do your job well. So anyone who lords yourself over, who uses that power relationship over somebody else, that causes Tiferes to alight, right, to withdraw from Netzach and Hode. So Tiferes is associated with the written Torah. And Netzach and Hode are the ways in which it's supposed to be manifesting in this world. But when the conduit for Torah, the teacher, becomes somebody who breaks that relationship, Tiferes withdraws. And Netzach and Hode are left on their own. Now it's worth noting, even though actually this is an aspect I decided not to cover in this class, Netzach and Hode are the Sefirot that are also associated with prophecy. All of the prophets, except for Moshe Rabbeinu, drew on Netzach and Hode. Moshe Rabbeinu actually went straight to the source, to Tiferes, because Moses saw through a lens that was not cloudy, and all the other prophets saw through a smoky lens. Moses got right to the source, right? He spoke face to face with God, Kivyochel. So Netzach and Hode are not just about Torah in theory. Netzach and Hode are about what happens when Torah comes into the world. So when the teacher puffs themselves up over their students, the relationship between Torah and its actualization in Netzach and Hode is broken. So Tiferes withdraws. The Tiferes gets Yisgael, right? Tiferes inflates, and it's like a balloon. It starts rising up from atop Netzach and Hode. Shehem limudei Hashem talmidei Tiferes, because they are those who are the students of God, right? They are learners of God, the students of Tiferes. So when the teacher gets puffed up, so does Tiferes, and Tiferes withdraws, because it gets so important, because they think it's all about you, but it's not. It's about bringing it down into the world, manifesting it in Netzach and Hode. So, v'amashpil atzmo, but one who brings oneself down, umilameda bi'ahava, and teaches Torah with love, gam hatiferes yashpil atzmai el talmidav v'yashpiem. Then Tiferes too, as it were, lowers itself and flows into its students, Netzach and Hode. You'd think, right, with the classic, cliched dynamics of spiritual experience, that you're supposed to escape. You're supposed to float up to heaven. But even in Kabbalah, I would even say especially in Kabbalah, it's not about escaping this world. It's about bringing God into it as much as you can. The best teacher does not buy into their role and their honor, but rather realizes, and here's the Hode element, that there's a dignity in Torah that can't be tainted. such that it empowers you to do what? Fling yourself on the ground. Play with the kids. Do whatever you need to do to bring Torah to them. Your dignity cannot be besmirched because dignity cannot be besmirched. Maybe your reputation can be, how you regard yourself, the way you fear others regard you. Those things are vulnerable. But dignity, per Kathy's intuition quite rightly, is a reflexive quality. It's how you regard yourself, or rather, I would say, how you draw on God's independent dignity, realizing that you too share that sense of independence and that sense of, I would say, that sense of that quality. There is a saying in the Talmud actually about a good teacher, and I think this is what is in the back of his brain. A good teacher plays on the ground with the students to make sure that they learn. A teacher is not worried about their sense of honor. They're concerned about their students' well-being. They're concerned about the students having the correct conditions they need to learn. And it's a really incredible, powerful image of of creative humility. I would say a humility that's not performative. It's not about being recognized as humble. It's about using humility, being humble, humbling yourself, but because you know that it's ultimately not the point. Whatever the opposite of the humility is, isn't the goal. Humility brings you to the goal of closeness, of connection. Bring yourself to the level of the people who need you. That's the Iker. This is, it's not irrelevant, I think, that these Sefirot are associated with prophecy. If anyone's familiar with the work of Abraham Joshua Heschel, blessed memory, his doctoral dissertation was a book called Die Prophetie, The Prophets, and he wrote a translation in English called The Prophets. And in it, he has this beautiful image that's real. I've carried with me for over a decade now, maybe more. That God, we don't have the narrative that Christianity does, in which God humbles God's self, right, by becoming a human being, right, becoming flesh and blood. So because of that, the cliche about Judaism is, Judaism is purely transcendent, right? Christianity is immanent, Judaism is transcendent. And Heschel pushes back and saying, no, because you're actually missing the true nature of biblical Judaism, of prophetic Judaism, which is that God is seated on the throne of glory, Kisei HaKavod, and looks and perceives human suffering. And God sacrifices God's glory for the sake of the well-being of God's creatures. That's the turn to immanence, and that's the role of the prophet, is bringing God down, Netzach and Hode, down to the people. God sacrifices God's lofty nature of glory for the sake of human well-being. It's radical. It's mind-blowing when you really think about it. Not that we can really understand that fully, but still, it's a really pungent point. And that, in my opinion, is dignity. The difference between kavod, seated on the throne, and the willingness to do whatever it takes to connect, to serve others. You need dignity to be able to do that. Or else, in a sense, you're just indulging a based instinct in you. I love lowering myself. Then it's about you, right? You love lowering yourself. But if lowering yourself, in a sense, is just choreography, yeah, that's how I get closer to the ground. Because in me is a still, quiet core that doesn't matter where I am vis-a-vis the X and Y axis. All that matters is I'm close to you. That quietude, which is radicalizing and empowering, is, I believe, what Hode, that combining those elements is, and that's such an interesting tension because it's quietude, it's peace, but on the other hand, it's activistic. Hode draws from the right side. It pushes you into the world because now you can do anything. No one can get that. No one can get that kernel in you. Netzach is them trying. Hode is you standing. It's incredible. Incredible spiritual resources God has given us. Okay. So we see that Netzach and Hode, they are the students vis-a-vis Tiferes, and the real task of Tiferes is to bring down that shefa into them, which means that you don't get puffed up, you don't float away, but rather you see yourself as fundamentally connected and you bring yourself to where they are. That is that has the clear practical implications in terms of the student-teacher relationship on Earth. Fine. But let's look at the very practical implications, because he says here, Od sarich, we must also attend to the fact that ha'osek b'Torah shu yomod mikol adam. One who is osek b'Torah, one whose vocation, what they spend all day doing, is Torah. They need to learn from every person. Again, it's not necessarily a conclusion you'd come to if you were like, oh, and I think this is the case in a lot of factions in the Jewish world. Oh, I learned Torah all day. Don't bother me with all that other stuff. Let me stay in my velveteen tower with my gold brocade. Let me stay enshrined, I would say entombed, in the base medrash. No, Isaac B'Torah not just can, must learn from every person. The humbling of that is only humbling if you see yourself first as better. But if you have dignity, if you are a Hode infused person, you don't see this as like some kind of radical reversal of a hierarchy. You're learning Torah, right? If you are Osek B'Torah, you need to learn it from everybody, because otherwise you're missing all the Torah. You let your ego get in the way. You get what you think you deserve get in the way. You're missing all of these amazing opportunities to learn. Someone whose life is Torah. It is imperative that they learn from every person. As it said, Mikol milamdei hiskalti. From all of those who have taught me, I have become enlightened. But the Mikol, from all of them, I gain enlightenment from anyone who teaches me. Again, it's the dignity of, it's the empowerment of forgetting about social roles, of forgetting about hierarchies, of being somebody who is genuinely trying to live life with integrity and to engage with others on that plane. And think of how this flows and it circulates, right? You, an Osek B'Torah, somebody who is, the paragon of a Jewish society, going out and learning from as many people as you can, that's an immensely empowering gesture for others besides yourself, right? Oh, this Rosh Yeshiva wants to learn from me. Oh, this rabbi wants to learn from me. Oh, this Yoetzes Halacha wants to learn from me, right? Like the fact that people of importance, people whom you regard with honor, are treating you with dignity, transvalues that relationship, right? It changes its internal nature, and it shows you from the outside how to see yourself. And that, I think, models how you start to learn how to regard yourself instead of letting others deem you as worthy. For have somebody who carries themselves with that dignity treat you with dignity, shows you that you are worthy of dignity, and then this is very much the model actually that Jonathan Lear talks about in his book Love and Its Place in Nature. He's a psychiatrist and a philosopher, He says actually that what we learn from our parents as we develop as children and what we learn from the world, in a sense, shows us actually the edges of what we need to know for how to parent ourselves, right? As we individuate, as we mature, how to access these things for ourselves, right? These are all model lessons. And in Hasidic literature, it's rife with pedagogical images that God created a world to be something that we learn. God gave us God's self in ways that we could take in. That's a pedagogical model, right? And that is the model of this, coming to where someone is so that they can benefit. That is Hode. God's not worried about God's reputation, right? The way that actually Moses reminds God of reputation, but it's of abandoning us, not of coming close, right? Oh, the nations are going to say that you left them, that you didn't take care of them. They're going to see you as a bad God. You know what? Fair play, Moses. But Moses doesn't say, the nations are going to look at you and say, oh, you cared too much. Oh, you brought yourself down to dwell with them in the Mishkan. That's never something that Moses is concerned about, because that's what it means to be God. That's what it means to have that irreproachable dignity. Ki ein ha-Torah mishtalametz etzel rav echad, because Torah is not ever complete with just one teacher, one rabbi, one master. V'chevan shu nasa talmid lakol, zochel lios merkava el Netzach v'Hode. Now it's interesting, the word kol actually is a code word for yesod, but we'll save that for next week. But when somebody becomes a student for all, one merits to become a merkava, a throne, a seat, a venue, a dwelling place for Netzach and Hode, the limudei Hashem, God's students. V'hamashpia elav Torah hu b'madregas tiferes, and the one who then bestows Torah, that's the source of Torah, that's tiferes. We don't need to get caught up in the technical details, but the point here for this week of Netzach and Hode, is that you having the dignity and the confidence to learn from all magnifies Torah, helps complete Torah, and it's the only way to complete Torah. And this is a very important point. How do you complete Torah? Not by being a teacher, but by being a student. How do you complete Torah? Not by propagating it, but by learning it. Right? That's a very important point here. It's not just the producers of Torah. I wouldn't say consuming is the other side of it, but it's not just, again, the hoity-toity rabbis or whatever. It's somebody who has the audacity, again, the quiet audacity to learn from all. That's what is mishtalim Torah. That's what causes Torah to become complete. And when somebody sits and learns, one merits tiferes, which is bestowing onto, flowing into Netzach and Hode. It completes the downward-facing, right, triad. We saw before, right? Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes. We saw that in the first week, right? But that's a different triad than this one, in which it's the other triangle, right? It's Tiferes flowing down into its students. All right? So that's V'hu b'madregasam mamish. You're really on that level if you, by learning from all, are activating that dynamic, not just here on earth in which you're causing knowledge to circulate and to flow. You're becoming a voracious learner, but it's not just, you're not just taking in, you're not just consuming, you are also showing. You're showing what it means to be a student. You're showing what it means to be committing to Torah. You're showing what it means in the world to be someone devoted to Torah, devoted to Yiddishkeit, devoted to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And that it produces, right? That changes the world. That is, be the world you want to see. Okay. So here I want to put a pin in that. So we talked about Hode, especially in its dynamic with its relationship with Netzach and Tiferes. But I focus on the Hode aspect of it. Again, the dignity that empowers us to bring ourselves to wherever we need to be, to not worry about its implications and its potential, besmirching, what have you, because there's a quiet dignity that can't be touched, and it empowers us to go and to do what we need to do. But I said before at the top of the class that Hode is associated with my own great ancestor, Aharon HaKohen, Aaron the high priest, right? And I want to spend the rest of the class focusing on the example that Aaron sets. And we're going to find that productive tension that we saw before of Hode as quiet, Hode as peace, right? Hode as irenicism. But on the other hand, Hode as active, right? Drawing from the right side. Hode as going out there. Hode as putting yourself in the position. So we see a very famous passage from Pirkei Avos. Hillel Omer, Hillel says, Heve mi talmidav shel Aaron, be like disciples of Aaron. Ohev shalom, v'roidev shalom, oheves abrios, mekarvan l'Torah. Says, love peace, pursue peace, love other creatures, and bring them close to Torah. That's Aaron the high priest. Now, it's not necessarily evident in the Chumash that that's what he's associated with, but in terms of the oral tradition of Judaism, which is bigger than just the 5 books of Moses, we have this image of Aaron as being somebody who is devoted towards interpersonal relationships. Now, I make a case generally that the Kohen is actually doing that in a very strong way. That the chesed nature of Kohen combines with the Hode nature. It's the dignity of being able to help people move on. Right? Help people have the rituals that they need to reconnect with God, bring them close to Torah, right? To help them reconnect with their souls, to help them have what the choreography they need in the offerings and the sacrifices and the avodah, right? The service, to be able to reconnect with their truest self. Rashi comments on this passage from Bamidbar Perek Kaf, in which it says, Kol Beis Yisrael, the entire people of Israel wept for Aaron, even all the house of Israel. And Rashi asks, that seems kind of excessive, right? Why? Right? This is his death, right? So why so sad? Right? Why are they so sad? This is really sad. They wept and wept and wept. 30 days, right? A long time. So why? Why so sad? And he says, Anashim ve'hanashim. Kol Beis Yisrael, the entire household of Israel. So it's not just men, or not just women, everybody. Lefi shehaya Aaron rodef shalom. Why? Because he was so inspiring in his pursuit of peace. Umatil ahava. Someone who instilled love between Ba'alei Meriva, people who were fighting, uven ish leishto, and estranged spouses. So he's not a nosy person. It's not like he's seeking out other people's business. He's not seeking out other people's business. He doesn't want to know the hot goss. He doesn't want to know the juicy deets. But Aaron is concerned with other people's business in the sense that he's concerned with their well-being. He's concerned with the health of their relationships. So Aaron is a kind of interpersonal mediator. Aaron is a relationship therapist, right? Aaron is a marital counselor, something like that, right? Aaron is concerned about strife between people. Now, listen, sometimes friendships break up. Sometimes marriages end. The Torah is aware of this. We have rituals for these things. Well, we don't have a friendship breakup ritual, but the Torah does not command us to stay in relationships which are not healthy and which do not serve us. Of course not. But in this case, we're talking about situations which have reparable qualities to them. They're ones that can be healed. And Aharon is the one, and as we'll see, he'll be compared to a doctor later, but who's the one who's going off trying to heal interpersonal relationships. So this is Hode. This is Hode. Why? It's unclear, right? Again, this is more activistic than we tend to think Hode to be. Hode is quietude. Hode is dignity. Right? But this is like Aaron, Rodef Shalom, pursuing peace, right? He is getting out there and looking for peace. That's what he's doing. He's going out there being a holy busybody, trying to find ways to bring people close together again. But what's going on? Why is this Hode? I'm going to try to figure out with you a way in which we can see that Aaron is trying to help people reconnect with what they thought they lost. Reconnect with, again, that core, that kernel element, that all of the Sturm and Drang, right, of their lives have helped to obscure. That's the key for Aaron. So, first we'll look. All right, this is a wonderful text. This, in a sense, should be, in a sense, before what we just saw, but it has to be after because the Rambam cites love, peace, and pursue peace. Ohev shalom v'rodeh shalom. I think actually we're gonna skip this in the class, but I'll post the source sheet. You should look at it on your own, but just I'll say it on the outside. So in the Mishnah Torah, in his halachas around the ways to be a person, his hilchos deos, he says, how should Talmid Chacham be? Well, he very much draws on what we were seeing before, right? Where the Ramak agrees with him. No, Rambam's before the Ramak, so I guess. But he says basically, in short, Talmid Chacham is supposed to be a quiet, peaceful, dignified person, right? Talmid Chacham is supposed to know what, in a sense, what it means to be someone who is representing the Torah in this world. Now, listen, I'm a more bombastic person. I'm a bit more performative or whatever. And I read this and I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe there's something for me to learn here. But the point of it is really about qualities. The point is really about qualities. I think actually, if anything, again, there's always something for people to learn. I feel very grateful for the way in which I've had opportunities serving as a rabbi, as a spiritual leader. It hasn't taught me, I love to teach and I love to give over Torah. But the deepest Torah, in a sense, I've learned is when I'm just talking with people, how to be quiet. And I've really found that you're able to give somebody so much with quiet, with an attentive ear. And I think I'm very grateful for the ways in which these opportunities have helped me learn patience. Not to raise your voice. Speak softly, speak kindly with other people. I wish we saw more Torah like this in today's world. What does it mean to be a good Yid? What does it mean to be a good Jew? Speak softly. Be attentive. Don't raise your voice. Speak with kindness and softness when you speak to others. Make sure to greet them first, because it's going to make them feel good. Judge every person with the benefit of the doubt. Speak kindly of your friends. Don't disparage them. Love peace and pursue peace. That's what it means to be a Talmid Chacham. So we see that, I would say, essentially, Rambam is drawing from the paradigm not of Moses, but from Aharon, of what it means to be a Talmid Chacham. It's surprising. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher. Of course, that's what it should be to be a Talmid Chacham. But what's amazing about Judaism is that actually the highest level you can be is you never stop being a student. You're a Talmid Chacham. You're a student of the wise. You're a student of Torah. You never advance out of being a student in Judaism. I think it's a really important corrective. So, I want to move to this text that actually Rashi cited, but we're going to look at it a little bit more in depth. So this is from Avos to Rabbi Nassan, which is the quasi-Gemara on Pirkei Avos. It is not quite Talmud. But it's also not quite Mishnah. It's not in the Talmud. It seems like it's a fairly early text. It was published in a very, very nice edition by the late, great Solomon Schechter of the Day School franchise fame. A Romanian scholar who was the first chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary. And it's published in 2 different editions, so you get double the Torah for, bang for your buck. So in the Avos to Rabbi Nassan, it is, again, it's a commentary, quasi-commentary on Pirkei Avos. So commenting on this passage we saw above, Hillel saying, be like Aaron a Kohen, love peace and pursue peace. It says, Rodev Shalom. How so? How do you pursue peace? It's a good question. This teaches that a person should pursue peace in Israel between everyone in the way that Aaron would pursue peace in Israel between everyone. As it says, turn from evil, sur meira, and do good, ba'aseh tov. Bakesh shalom, seek peace, virod fehu, and pursue it. Okay, so it says you should keep your head on a swivel, right? You should be looking for opportunities to make peace between people. Okay, but that's still kind of generic, right? Let's get really into it. And this passage blew my brain. It said, and here's what Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, right, the famous Tana said. Im yoshev adam bimkomo v'shosek. If someone sits in their place quietly, that sounds like Hode, doesn't it? Sit, quiet. Heach rodev shalom b'Yisrael. How could they ever seek peace in Israel? Stira, right? Contradiction. What's going on? Aharon HaKohen is Hode. Hode is being quiet, sitting still in yourself. But if he's being Hode-like, he can't be doing it, because doing it is pursuing peace. So how can we have these two things? Now, I think we already, in a way, saw an implied synthesis above, which I'll remind us of later. But I just wanted to bring this to attention because it's such a fascinating challenge. Because Rebbe Shimon ben Elazar says, if you are just going to be of quiet dignity, then you are going to be missing opportunities to do good. Because if you're just meditating all day, right, you're withdrawn within yourself. You're not actualizing what it is that the meditation hopefully is helping you achieve. Now, meditation's not about achievement, that's true, but it is supposed to be about manifestation, right? It's supposed to come into the world in some way. This, I mentioned this distinction before, is the difference between Hinayana and Mahayana Buddhism, right? Between the small vessel and the great vessel. Nirvana as escaping this world versus nirvana as attaining enlightenment and re-entering this world, the Bodhisattva model. So, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, the first Bodhisattva, is saying you cannot escape. You cannot just sit and meditate. You need to pursue peace. Ela yotze mimkomo v'yachzor ba'olam v'yirdof shalom b'Yisrael. Leave your place, like Avram Avinu. Hode draws from Chesed. Leave your place. Leave your home. Leave your parental abode. Or return there for a couple weeks and then leave your parental abode. Circulate around the world and pursue peace in Israel. Now, Israel, as we'll see later, often refers to the people of Israel, yes, but I think Kabbalistically speaking also refers to this entire sublunar plane, all of this manifested created world. Okay, so that's why I want to bring it. It actually brings an incredible text about how God sought peace between the angels and encouraged them actually to look towards each other. The angels don't just sing on their own. They always look to their friends. They always look to their colleagues and say, are you ready to sing? Are you ready to sing? And that's our model for a minyan. We don't daven on our own. We look to each other for support and prayer. So God is the model for pursuing peace here. Aharon is the model of pursuing peace. You're never too good. So this is a tour of quasi-Gemaras. This is from Maseches Kala, which is a later post-Talmudic tractate. It's the tractate of brides. It's the tractate about wedding ceremony stuff, not the contract stuff that we have Maseches Ksubos about, but actually about kind of the wedding ceremony. And it is a Gaonic tractate. It's from the post-Talmudic period. It's collected in a grouping of tractates called the Masechtas Katanos, the little tractates, the tiny tractates. So from this, who has a good edition? David Brodsky has a very good edition of this. If you want to look for it. So here we have, again, most likely this is one of the sources that the Rambam is drawing from. So he says, what does it mean to be a Talmid Chacham? You should be of shafal ruach, lowly spirit. I prefer humble spirit. Humble spirit. And we learn this from Aharon, of course. Because it says, Sifsei Kohen Yishmeru Das Torah Yivakshu Mipihu. The lips of the Kohen guard knowledge. You should seek Torah from his mouth. Ki malach Hashem tzivakoshu. Because Aaron, or the Kohen, is an angel, a messenger of God. And it says, from the verse previous in Malachi 2:6, it says, Torah's emes hayasa b'fiyu. True Torah, the Torah of truth, is in his mouth. Avla lo nimtza b'sfasav. You find no falsehood between those lips. B'shalom uv'mishor holech iti. Walking with peace and integrity, honesty, with me. V'rabim heishiv me'avon. Causing many people to do tshuva, to turn back from sin. And you don't have anyone of more humble spirit than somebody who pursues peace. Even try to imagine, says the text, how could somebody of ignoble spirit, of haughty spirit, be someone who pursues peace? And here we have the synthesis. It's not entirely there yet. We'll get to the synthesis in the next text. But we're here already, I think, because I think it was already hinted at in the Tomer Devorah. In the Tomer Devorah, it says, what does it mean to be able to pursue Torah? It's to bring yourself down to where it is. The only way to have dignity is to actually, in a way, put it to the test. Dignity is not trying to stay away from getting dirty. Dignity is having shining eyes no matter how much mud is on your face. That's dignity, right? Dignity is being in the scrum, but maintaining your composure. Dignity is being in the thick of it, but maintaining true to yourself. Dignity is not sitting at home alone in your room. Dignified from what? Right? You've escaped. Maybe there is dialectical quality here in dignity. Not that you should test it, that's Netzach, but that it is to be tested. You have dignity in the midst of things, not by escaping things. And if you were to achieve that dignity, that quietude, that shefel ruach, that then it pushes you, it impels you back into the world. Because to activate that, right, that quietude of spirit, means that you want others to have peace as well. This really is very similar to the Bodhisattva model of how could you ever attain enlightenment and then leave creatures unenlightened? Right? How could you escape to Gan Eden and not want others to be able to reach it too? What kind of enlightenment is that? It's a cheap, paltry enlightenment. That's like enlightenment, but in the way it's low calorie, right? That's like enlight, L-I-T-E. It's not good. It's not good. Get the full fat dressing. It's delicious. So here we have Hakeet Saad. What does this mean? How so? If somebody curses them, they're quiet because your dignity can't be harmed. That's their problem. Whatever they're saying, that's their problem. And if two people are fighting, what then? They calm their spirit and instead go to speak with them and attempt to appease them. And here's what brings us to the most famous passage, rabbinic passage, that unpacks this idea of Aaron. So Aaron, and I'll say this outside. Aaron, when coming across two people in a fight, in broigus, right, would go and he would first fact find. He would first go and investigate. He has to get the facts on the ground first, because you never want to enter a situation that you haven't really done your homework for. So first he would go and listen. He'd go and listen. Then he would go to one of the parties and he would say, And they would greet, and this is very interesting because the Hasidic text we'll look at after this notes this. They would say, "Oh, it's Aaron the Kohen. Holy mackerel! Hello, we're not worthy. He says, "Why are you here?" And Aaron says, "I'm here because your friend sent me." Now, is that true? No. Above in the Rambam, actually, we didn't see this, but he says you should never change what you say, except if it brings peace. So Aaron tells a fib, let's call it. Says, your friend sent me to help, basically to make things up. He says, oh, I'm so sorry. He's like crying. Oh no, I've hurt my friend's feelings. I'm torn up about this. I feel terrible. And then the person hearing this, right, one of the aggrieved parties starts to think, whoa, it's tzaddik like Aaron came to me. He did the tircha, right? He went out of his way to come to little old me to help me feel better. And then it says miyad. It says immediately. He says, no, it was me. I did it. It was me. I hurt them. So I want to actually make a claim here that I actually don't think Aaron's lying. I think Aaron's being creative. I don't think Aaron's being descriptive. I think Aaron is actually tapping into something that they forgot. It says in the Talmud, actually, that you only ever sin if a spirit of folly, a spirit of madness fills you. You have to be possessed when you do something wrong. I think we've all had experiences where we're like, oh, what took me over? Why would I that wasn't, you ever like written in your journal, that wasn't me? Right? That wasn't me. Aaron gets that. It wasn't you. I mean, it was you. You're responsible for it. But it's not the you want to be. You want to be friends. You love this person. And what Aaron's doing is helping you remember. It's actually somewhat similar, I think, to Plato's model of learning, right? And we have this in the Midrash as well, right? The Midrash says we have all of Torah. We know all of Torah. And then the angel comes and touches us in our filtrum. Is that what's called? Filtrum? Whatever it is. This little divot thing, right? That's why we have a little divot here. Angel comes, hits the hard reset button on our brains. We forget all our Torah. And whatever we learn, we're really remembering. Aaron helps us relearn to love. Remember the truth of that connection. The truth of that connection in ourselves. The truth that we don't want to hurt people we love. We get possessed. We get swept up in things. There's a Twitter storm. There's some kind of social pressure. There's something that is helping us go off course. Aaron reminds us of something that's not true in the moment, but should be true, can be true again. That's what Aaron's doing. So you are empowered to do a number of things. Be a busybody, get involved with people's business, and lie to them, all for the sake of pursuing peace. Now that, I think, should actually set us back a set and say, wait a second, that seems like an open door. Right? That seems like a potential for mistreatment, maybe going too far. And you're not alone in thinking that. So the Degel Machne Ephraim, from Ephraim Moshe Chaim Sudelikov, one of the early Hasidic masters, great grandson, just regular grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, attends to this as well. He says, he's like weirded out by the fact that pursuing peace requires some kind of explanation because pursuit implies victory. Netzach. Doesn't Rodef Shalom seem more like a Netzach, a right side, like an activistic thing to be doing? Isn't this weird? He says, fine. You can solve this from a mushal that I learned from my holy sainted grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov. He says, this is an amazing parable. A parable of a doctor, an expert and wise doctor, wonderful in matters of natural science and medical conditions. When they approach a patient with a challenging illness and investigate, they are able to rely on their knowledge and prescribe drugs, right? Because they're, a good doctor. No, but like an expert doctor, A class. Though they are very sharp and bitter, the drugs, with potential mortal side effects. But they understand that this condition requires these drugs to be treated. So what kind of doctor is able to take the risky choice, but the necessary choice? One who knows what they're doing. Who's allowed to take bold interventionary steps? Only the ones who are fully conscious of what the implications are, have gone through all of the possibilities, run it all through the system, and come to the sober and judicious conclusion that this is the best path. Right? I think actually, if anything, what COVID hopefully should be teaching us, and this is actually something especially a lot of disability advocates are trying to bring to public health attention, is that risk assessment is a fundamental aspect of life, not just of these strange circumstances. We are always engaged in some kind of sense of risk assessment. There's never a squeaky clean path. It's now just being, now more of us are being exposed to how fraught things can be and how much, in a sense, health is often a question of trade-offs. All these things about side effects and vaccines and the like. Many people don't have that choice of like, which consumer drug do I take, which is going to be the better one for me? Because what we're talking about is an entire body politic of people who are keeping each other healthy or not. Right? So it's a very different kind of risk assessment question because your other people's well-being is in your hands. That's the fascinating thing about a vaccine. A vaccine is not a cure. Now, people talk about it in terms of dessert. It's not something you deserve because you were a good boy. You're not getting cured. You're helping others. You're helping others by neutralizing yourself as a vector, right? As a potential cause of other people's harm or sickness. So, this wise and expert doctor can prescribe radical medical intervention only because they've done their A-levels, right? Only because they have degree after degree after degree. Only because they've done everything they can in which they can say at the end of the day, this is the right choice. It's the choice that's worth taking. Now, maybe the risk assessment, the cost-benefit analysis nowadays would be very different, but 18th century, early 19th century text, very, very prescient, I think very conscious of how medicine is as a question of narrative and a question of judgment. He says another doctor, some doc schmo, may not have license to make similar choices. License in the sense of it does not have permission really, should not do this because they don't have the expertise of the former. It's quite possible that they might make a mistake, misprescribe, and end up causing a loss of life. Right? The other person gave potentially dangerous drugs, but in the way in which it will have if prescribed well, will have the correct results. Will have the beneficial results. But if a doctor who does not know what they're doing, right? Who does not know what they're doing, say, that's the good medicine. It's the one that can do the good thing, but then give it to the wrong person. Right? So knowing what you're talking about is required before you intervene. Aho. Through this, we can understand the rabbinic teaching about Aaron. And in a sense, I don't need to tell you. You get the nimshal. We're not talking about Kohen Hediot here. We're not talking about some Joe Schmo Kohen. Ko Schmo. We are talking about Aaron the high priest. Now, again, it's not saying that that's just an exceptional person you can't be like. You are supposed to model yourself after Aaron. Heve mitalmidei shel Aaron HaKohen, right? Be like the students of Aaron HaKohen. You should be like them. Pursue peace. But here is the amazing dialectic of Hode. Here's the dialectic of Hode. Quietude, dignity, humility, a humble spirit. The expert doctor prescribes the drugs not because they want to be regarded by their colleagues as that hotshot Dr. House type guy. That expert doctor does that because they have made a sober calculation about what is going to help the patient and put themselves in a position of risk because it could go wrong. But they're putting the patient's well-being above everything else. That is good practice of medicine. And that is good therapeutic practice when it comes to Aaron, this proto-quasi-counselor type character, this figure of a mediator, is that you intervene when necessary, and you intervene wisely and judiciously. You first go and learn. You first ask questions. You first investigate. You first know everything you need to know. Because if you didn't do that, that's not Hode-like of you. Hode is the dignity of putting others first, of being at service of others, but not in a way that it's debasing, in a way that is deeply dignifying. Okay, we're not off on this kick of like Mother Teresa style, like lowering ourselves in this kind of spectacle of abasement. Aharon his dignity is essential to this, because it says his bringing people close to Torah is from this as well, because someone's going to say to themselves, how could it be that Aaron the high priest went out of his way, he made the tircha of going and tracking me down and making sure that my friendship healed. Wow. Wow. How could I have been like that? Right? His example, his model of dignity, of how it is worth his time to go and make sure you're making up with your friend. What does that say about what you are worth? You're worth everything. And thus, you can't squander your worth. You need dignity too. The model of dignity is generative, and it needs to go into the low places because it shows that dignity can't be lowered. Dignity is everywhere. There's a very important and essential lesson we learn, and it's one of learning from others. The Talmid Chacham goes and learns from every person. And by learning from every person, it shows every person that they need to learn from every person, and that they're someone who can be learned from as well. It is ennobling, this dignity. This is a lowness of nobility, because it knows that position does not impute importance. Your place on the ladder, if you believe in it, you're lacking dignity. Dignity cannot be changed based on your position. Dignity is, in its very essence, quiet, steady, and persistent. So back to our originating adage, Hode is like doing your dirty laundry. It is. Because it's doing everything you need to do to make sure that you are dignified, that you're taking care of yourself, that you're taking care of your body, you're taking care of your soul, doing the drudgery, but knowing that it doesn't dirty you. You do the dirty laundry so that you have the clean clothes, so that people love each other again, so that your student knows that they can teach as well. You put yourself in the dirty, laundriest positions to bring dignity to every corner of this world. Keni Ratzon, so may it be. Here's where I'm going to close the recording of the class. But before I do, I just want to remind us that we'll be having actually a special class on Thursday. It's usually the Parsha chat, but this week, because it is this very night, Hode Sheve Hode, dignity and dignity, majesty and majesty, will be Lag BaOmer. So we'll be having a special Lag BaOmer class. So we'll be learning about the holiday. It'll be a fun one. If you want to bring your bow and arrow, please do. And we'll learn all about the different qualities of it. If you have ideas about what you'd like to do in Lag BaOmer, I don't have my guitar with me. I wanted to originally do some more singing, but we can definitely do some singing too. So please do let me know. Feel free to reach out. And we'll be having the return to Kabbalat Shabbat, probably around 7:20. and return Havdalah probably around 9:20. And keep your eyes peeled for the newsletter, should be coming out soon. And just as also a plug for the in-person class, after I close this recording, we're going to have a little time just to talk, just amongst ourselves, and we'll be able to talk about what Hode means to us and ways to bring it into our lives. So please check the comment for the source sheet so you can learn along at home, and I look forward to learning with you very soon. Take care.